Well, the Russian plane is one question, but whether or not Sergei supposed Million Penchenko died on that plane is another thing. If you simply Google Sergei Penchenko, you'll get about 100 of them. I guess it's like a Russian for John Smith. So the Harvard professor who actually released this as a story was actually doing it to just stir up trouble. But the Trump effect has bounced back on that anti-Trumper. And what has come to light now is the previous Washington Post's articles that show that they stated that they had direct information from the FBI that said that Sergei Millian Penchenko was source D in the salacious Russian dossier. Now, source D shows up again and again in the dossier, and by the way, I want to reiterate, everyone should read it so that you can realize what a piece of garbage it is, and that all of this attempted coup d'etat, attempted overthrow of a duly elected president was based upon this garbage, which now we know was actually combined from a variety of dossiers, and that Christopher Steele didn't just write it himself. But what I am beginning to think is that there were more Russian connections to this than just Christopher Steele wishing that he had some Russian connections, because they kept connecting people to Russians. Now, what's really peculiar, this beautiful opportunity that we have with this fake news, which came out from the alternative news side this time, but they were set up and they didn't do their homework. And what has really come out is, oh, better than anything, he's not dead. And he is the Russian interference in the election and the key player in the dossier. And the dossier, he literally, according to the dossier, he is, in Putin's pocket. He's in the top pockets of every single top Russian administrator. He was completely conversant with Uranium One and Paul Manafort and the setup with the Romanian hackers in Prague and Carter Page and so on and so forth. He set Carter Page up, and Carter Page is going to get 19% of Rosneft, which is, as we said before, actually, there's two different stories. One is from the people that Carter Page set up in New York. He was supposed to get 19% of Gazprom. Dossier says 19% of Rosneft. It doesn't matter. It's still about, $10 to $11 billion a year. And somehow, Sergei Millian, who doesn't use his last name when he's an American because he's a Russian national businessman who could easily be confused with the person who went down in that plane, because many of those people were flying to the town right next to Kazakhstan. And the CFO of Rosatom was supposedly on that plane. Again, we don't know that, and I would never speculate to say until I saw absolute confirmation that that was the same person, because it is true. If there are two people to take out, it would be them. And if there's anyone who knows how to take them out, it's the Anonymous Patriots. We know about the QRS-11. We know that when it went to France, it also was spread to Russia. So we know that these same uninterruptible autopilot QRS-11s and QRS-14s are in Russian planes too. But it looks as if there might have been an explosion that brought it down, according to some. We're not going to speculate on that, but we will say that if the CFO of Rosatom, who was the main person, along with Putin himself, who did the Uranium One deal, who first sold to Frank Justra a useless Kazakhstani uranium mine, and then merged it with Eurasia, and then played these games back and forth so that then Uranium One could get 20% of the ore in America. But that's the tip of the iceberg. I need to tell everybody, go back and look at what we've already told you about why Putin had already taken control of all the uranium in America.
Well, why don't you refresh everyone so they don't have to go find where you said it, Thomas? Long breath.
Yeah, Daddy Bush created the U.S. Enrichment Corporation, which was an agreement with Russia to take 20 years, basically, of uranium-238 from nuclear missiles in Russia, bring it to America, or downblend it, bring it to America, upblend it, and then sell it to nuclear power plants. It was called megatons to megawatts. Huge, huge deal. When it was coming to an end, well, he started it, and then Bill Clinton came in, and man, Bill Clinton saw his opportunity, because uranium is about $10,000 an ounce. roughly speaking, anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 an ounce, depending upon how enriched and blah, blah, blah. But the deal is they were controlling uranium in this country all the way back to the beginning of Bill Clinton's first election. His first year in office was when megatons for megawatts came into play. And what it was a complete sellout of our entire nuclear program to Russia. So that at one point, Robert Mueller, as the step and fetch it boy for Secretary of State Clinton, who says she had nothing to do with the Uranium One deal, sent Mueller himself with yellow cake uranium that had been enriched illegally, by the way, across the borders to carry this, to Putin to deliver it to him so that Putin would know that when Rosatom bought into Uranium One, they were getting good stuff. And that Hillary Clinton guaranteed that we would enrich it here in America at our Paducah plant and the plant in New Mexico, which is subsidized by, of course, U.S. taxpayers. And then we now know, because of the conviction of Vadim Minikin, the oligarch who ran Rosatom's branch here in America called Tenam, and for years and years, even after the end of the program that was going on, the Russians got complete control of uranium here in this country and moving it and bribing people. But here's the deal. Everyone wants to think that they took it out through Port Canaveral, through Gulf Tainer, because it's owned by the United Arab Emirates. Incorrect. It was taken across the border from Detroit to Windsor. It went to an Ontario plant. We know exactly where it went. It was supposed to be down blended there, because in Canada they don't have any upblending and they don't actually do their own mining, even though they're the second largest source of uranium in the world. It comes to America, and so there's only a few companies that can bring it across the border. Well, the Russians were sneaking enriched uranium onto the trucks to ship to Ontario. Then Frank Juster's company, Uranium One, which was then owned by Rosatom, then shipped it out through Canada. And where did they ship it to? They didn't ship it to Russia. They have all the Kazakhstani uranium. They have more uranium than they know what to do with. As a matter of fact, Hillary Clinton gave them tens of millions of dollars in the last nuclear summit to build their own uranium enrichment plant, though they already have some. I think they have two, and she had them build another one because ours in Paducah was worn out because the Russians had worn it out, making money directly from us. This is the bigger story that no one wants to address. It's so huge, and $200 million was given directly to the Clinton-Juster Sustainability Growth Initiative. Okay? The $145 million to the Clinton Initiative and Clinton Foundation, that's the tip of the iceberg. They got paid off. They're still being paid off. And that was her number one vulnerability. That's what caused the Russian dossier. That's what caused Comey to go on to the Democratic team openly. That's what caused him to use Felix Sater. That's what caused him to use Carter Page, both who were FBI undercover agents. And that's what caused him to use, if I can get back to the topic, Sergei Millian Panchenko as another spy for the FBI. And by the way, he was a Russian national. Now, the reason this hasn't come out is because it's such a felonious, horrible, treacherous, treasonous, seditious crime. The FBI was in their counterintelligence operation, not investigation, used Sergei not only for the dossier and with Carter Page, and he's all through, Sergei is all through the dossier. He is source D. He was there, supposedly, when the horrors were doing this thing in Moscow with Trump, supposedly. Okay, can we just pick this guy up? Can we just put him in jail? Because if he is even in any way connected to the dossier, then he's our number one witness, isn't he? Oh, I'll tell you why he's our number one witness. He's the number one witness because he's also the Russian buddy that the Washington Post sung about over and over again that was friends with George Papadopoulos after Papadopoulos had been investigated for a year. Had the counterintelligence operation by the way, William Priest-Happ. No one wants to mention his name. He directed it. Strzok was nothing more than his hatchet man. So Papadopoulos was friends. Well, he wasn't friends. I mean, it's just like Carter Page became friends of the Trump team. So Sergei Millian became friends of the Trump team, and he became friends with Papadopoulos because he was the Russian connection, and Carter Page, he was the Russian connection. So he never made friends with Carter Page because Carter Page had nothing to do with the Trump team whatsoever, really. When it comes down to it, his name was on a piece of paper once. But Papadopoulos did. And so they had to go after him. Papadopoulos, sorry.
Because somebody's going to correct you on that.
Sorry, Papadopoulos, little Georgie Porgy. Little Georgie was a setup. And I told you before there were Russians involved in the setup. And I told you before that the professor was a Russian. He meets with Putin every year from the Valdi Conversation Club that he was trying to get Georgie into. So, who else was involved in that? Oh, that was Sergei Millian Panchenko. He was trying to set up George both in America and in Britain and in Italy, and he was his Russian connection. Okay? We know this because sources at a very high level told both the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN and others that George is in connection with Sergei, and that was why they got, of course, the permission to spy on George with an international FISA Section 702 warrant, and spy on Carter Page with a FISA Title I warrant, considering him to be a total spy. So what we have is Sergei Millian Panchenko as another Comey stooge in all of this, who was attempting to set up the people who were being set up. Is he dead? No. Should he be arrested? Yes. Where is he hiding out? I don't know that he'd be hiding out in Russia. Let's remember, even the ambassador to the United States had a mysterious heart attack in his room, didn't he? Right when all of this came out. 7 other people were gunned down, major oligarchs. We don't know all the sources. There were source A, B, C, D, and E in the dossier. We know that Sergei was source D. We don't know who the other sources are, but it could be that they're dead. And it could be that Sergei may be dead. And they're not going to waste a big plane on that. In Russia, they just shoot you down on the street and say you had a heart attack. That's what's happened, and if you stand up to Putin, you just get shot down. They don't waste any time. Or somebody touches you and you have a heart attack. It's very, very simple. So did Putin take out a whole plane to kill the CFO who was in charge of the Uranium One deal? No, that didn't happen. He would simply shoot him. Plus, why would he shoot him? He's the one who kept the double books. He's the one who knows all the secrets. He's going to be protected. He was flying back to where he lives. I mean, no, there's nothing even suspicious there. There was an explosion in one of the engines. And the fact that it was then blamed that the plane went down because they were going after and targeting Sergei, well, I don't know that. But notice, nobody's coming out and saying that Sergei's alive, are they? I don't know that Sergei's alive anymore. But I do know that he would be witness number 1 that should be called in the case of the salacious dossier, because he was witness to it. He was witness, according to the dossier, again and again and again, not only with the supposed direct standing there watching Trump and the prostitutes, but also he was there with the Michael Cohen setup in Prague. He knew all about Carter Page. He knew about Carter Page's meetings. He was connected to all of it. So Sergei was the key player in the dossier and the key player in George Papadopoulos, not Papapopoulos, Papadopoulos. And where is he? Where is he? Now, if you want to say, oh, the disinformation was a Putin trick, yeah, I can go for that. So that they won't even think anymore about, oh, well, the double books for the Uranium One deal in Kazakhstan. It's actually right across the border in Russia where they run it. But they're gone. He's gone. He's dead. Oh, that's convenient. Oh, and the number 1 witness for the salacious document that supposedly was created by Putin, because Putin, for 8 years, had been paying through Alpha Bank huge amounts of money to Trump long in advance of him even running. Ooh, isn't that an amazing thing? No, it's all lies. Please read the dossier. It's garbage. Don't believe what you hear, and especially don't believe anything you hear from Russia. And don't believe anything you hear from a Russian.
Or the Washington Post. This is very concerning that you say a Harvard professor came up with this name and fed that information to the Washington Post? That's at least what they say?
I don't know where he fed it to, but in all the articles, it just states that it's the people on the alternative news aren't being careful and they don't state their sources. But if you go to the Caller, I believe it was, that they state the name of the professor who actually threw this out there, and he's an anti-Trumper. He hates Trump, so he threw it out there just to mix things up. Now, the other day, I didn't finish a thought with you, Betsy, and that thought was when I said, don't believe the stuff that's thrown out there until you confirm it. Like, how about the new one? That the CIA was going to pay $10 million to a Russian who had dirt on Trump. And then they knocked it down to $1 million, and then they knocked it down to a $100,000 payment over time. And then the CIA got supposedly some dirt. It doesn't mention who in the CIA, doesn't mention the name of the Russian, doesn't mention when, doesn't mention how. Dun, 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 dun. They're now coming out and saying that that's false. But the Trump effect, the silly CIA, well, let's go back to the professor, the anti-Trump professor who just threw this stuff out. Now it's going to make us really look at who Sergei is and bring it to light. People didn't remember that he was quoted by the Washington Post and other fake Russian news sources that are much worse Russian news sources than Russia Today. That would be CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, the Mother Jones, Yahoo News, all of those, they were all paid. They were all paid by Fusion GPS, who, by the way, is also representing Planned Parenthood right now. Also is representing, well, it doesn't matter. Fusion GPS represents everything evil in the world. If we could get their records, we would see the true agents that are actually poisoning DC. And we've said that before. We know that they did even pay these people in the press. They paid Christopher Steele to come here and to meet with Bruce Orr and the press and the DNC. Wait till we find out who was there at the DNC during that meeting. And people will squeal because otherwise they're going to jail. So this is going to take a long time to get to the bottom of it, but you don't get to the bottom of it by putting two of the key witnesses for Uranium One, for the dossier, and for George Papadopoulos all on a plane and take them down in Russia and then try to blame it on the QRS-11, which, of course, we know Hillary Clinton has full control of. So, yes, a satellite could have taken that plane down, but there was an explosion in one of the engines. And we don't even know if the two people that are named really are the people who are named. We'll have to see the obituary. And by the way, if there is a Putin thing going on, I would suggest it would be more like this. That the CFO of Uranium One was booked to be on that plane. The plane did go down because it has a lot of Putin enemies on it, which means you wouldn't be getting the list from Russia of who was on the plane immediately thereafter. And guess what? The CFO of Rosatom did not get on the plane, but now he's dead. So he can't be questioned, and the guy who kept the double books for Putin's purposes is now well hidden in the witness protection program. I don't think that happened either. But if there was any kind of espionage, subterfuge, it could be that. Or let's remember, Putin is simply killing his opponents right now. Don't forget who Putin is. He's already put 2,400 people in jail. There were 2 peaceful demonstrations. He arrested all of them. They're all still in jail. They're going to be there till after the election. His number one opponent, he's already been arrested twice. Now he's in jail, probably permanently. You don't stand in Putin's way. If you get in the way of the most powerful Russian mafia oligarch that history has ever seen, your life expectancy is 0. Because they just gun people down. And when they're in a foreign ambassador in D.C. with no heart problems, they die of a heart attack now, don't they? Oh, that's right. We see that on Homeland. And if we're watching Homeland, if you're watching, HBO or Showtime's Homeland, just watch it, folks. They're putting everything that's going on in there as much as they can, just so that they can be topical.
Some kind of predictive programming? How do they stay so current with their topic on Homeland?
Well, they're like us. They're probably, either reading our stuff or they know ahead of time, seemingly. We could have named Sergei as a Comey spy the other day. It's not verified. It's not verified. Notice I'm not verifying it. I'm saying that Washington Post and 2 other fake Russian news agencies said that Sergei was source D. Because supposedly the A through E list, the people who are A through E of the dossier, was given to the FBI, and a top official in the FBI leaked this to the Washington Post. So is it true? We don't know. But do we know, just by his behavior, that Sergei Millian was certainly someone sent as a setup to go after Trump and Trump's team because of the weakness of Russia? Heck yeah. Just look at... why would a Russian want to be on the Trump team? Just think of that for a second. And by the way, I just want to make this perfectly clear. Christopher Steele is a foreign spy. This was espionage, and everyone involved in it, like Grassley's list of all the people from the DNC who we went down, and we named all of them and who they were, including Cody Shearer, who I pointed out was a yellow journalist. Nobody else pointed that out. And of course, Sidney Blumenthal, who was trying to help cover up the scandal. This is right in the emails. All you got to do is look at the releases and look at the WikiLeaks releases. Sidney Blumenthal is the one who said, oh, no, they don't have enough. The Justice Department has their bad dossier on Trump. The FBI tried to create one. They don't have too much. The CIA, we are told now, let's just go with that story, that they tried to buy some. We know that Mark Warner tried to buy some dirt on Trump. We know that Adam Schiff, the man writing the Democratic response to the Nunes memo, tried to buy Trump dirt. We know that McCain went and bought the dossier and is probably the person who released it to Yahoo News. So how many people are involved in this conspiracy for a coup d'etat, which in fact we could say was driven by foreign agents, which means they all go to jail for the rest of their life? I don't think you get out when it looks this way. And remember, what they're waiting on and what the Homeland story is all about right now is an attempted assassination of the president. Don't forget, we've already had a few of those. You're going to say, what is Thomas talking about? They picked up a man at Trump Towers who had an FBI issue pistol with the serial numbers scraped off. They took him into custody, they questioned him, and they released him. That was an assassination attempt, folks. There's been numerous assassination attempts. So when you want to say, oh, it's just a little old coup d'etat, it's just a George Soros regime change, and regime, oh, he's a regime, Trump's a regime, we have to change him because regime is bad. No, he's a duly elected president, and George Soros, you haven't paid any taxes since you created Quantum Hedge Fund. You're not an American. And by the way, I want to point something out. The real garbage going on here is garbage like Bill Browder, who was an American, who his Hermitage investment company in Russia became the largest outside investor. He was making more money off of fleecing Russia than any other person. So we went after him and said, you got to pay taxes. So he left America and he became a Brit, so he didn't have to pay taxes. He still continues to this day. He's the one driving the Magnitsky Act, which is it has nothing to do with children. It is the sanctions. The sanctions that the Russians really want taken off were created by Bill Browder, an American who doesn't pay taxes, who went to Britain, who continues to control through his donations to the Democratic Party, continues to control huge political influence in America, who got the Magnitsky Act passed with Hillary Clinton's support. Okay, what was that? That was to put sanctions on people that Bill said it took some of his money. Okay, he's dealing with Russian oligarchs. He should shut up. He's a thief. He should shut up. He and Goldman Sachs should get out of Russia or expect to be killed. That's what happens. Bill Browder, you're alive. You should be thankful. But you should not come to America and then get people like Natalia Keselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer, which was a setup with Comey. That was a Bill Browder thing. Bill Browder is as bad as Leonid Blavatnik, who sits on Gazprom, who says he's not a Russian. He says he's an American because he became a Brit and then he became an American and now he's the second largest secret donor to the Democratic Party. George Soros is the first. So he's a Russian. He still sits on Gazprom. And they want to talk about Russian influence? Let's talk about Sergei Millian Pachenko. Let's talk about the Comey spies. Let's talk about the Russians who had to sue Christopher Steele because they were mentioned in the dossier. There's the Russians who are not living, the Russians who are free to leave Russia, who aren't Russian politicians that are mentioned in the dossier. 4 of them have sued him. And the others would sue, but they're top Russian officials who had nothing to do with Christopher Steele. That much we can assure you. So what we're saying is don't believe things that are suppositions based upon non-realities, because that makes the alternative news look bad. Look at the reality. The reality is bad enough. We don't need to exaggerate. We don't need to create a conspiracy theory. We need to dissolve conspiracy theories and look at the real people behind them, name them, call them out, give the indictable information, and go after them. So that's what I just did. We know now, simply by circumstantial evidence, that the leaks from the FBI counterintelligence operation against Trump stated that source B was...
Source B or D?
D. Source D was Sergei Millian Pachenko. So if that's the case, why haven't they picked him up? Why isn't he arrested? Because he isn't even guilty. He didn't do any of that stuff. It didn't happen. They would find that out immediately. He would turn and sue them. But as I said, why doesn't Carter Page sue the right people? Because he is an undercover agent for Comey. Why doesn't Sergei sue? Because he's an undercover agent for Comey and for the CIA, for John Brennan. The initial impulse publicly and politically came from John Brennan and the CIA getting chatter and getting some confirmed information. We're now told he was trying to buy this from a Russian. Who was that he was buying it from? Sergei? Probably. Anyway, the point is the plane that went down, we're very sorry for the 71 people who died, and we don't really know, but we will still keep listening. And
well, I have to ask you then, because QAnon had a post kind of directing people to that plane crash. So
well,
what are we to make of QAnon?
It wasn't quite that exact.
No, it wasn't.
I looked at it again before I came onto the show today, and it isn't all that exact. And
well, nothing ever is with QAnon.
Yeah, it's an insinuation. But, then QAnon and everybody else came on and said, yes, this is Sergei, and he's dead, and he was in the dossier, and so is the CFO. Well, I will wait. If he were dead, wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think it would be Putin who killed him. And if the CFO, if he's dead, well, I would be surprised if he's dead. I would say he's in a witness protection program in Russia.